Good evening. I'd invite you to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome Commissioner Gehrig back to the podium.
Thanks.
Hope you're trained well now and can do the things you have to do for your job. Roll call, please.
Gehrig.
Here.
Greenberg.
Here.
Pepcorn.
Here.
Strand. Mahoney.
Here. Got to find my paper here. A couple of events have happened. Snowstorm, as you all know, but things around the city. Fire Captain Ben Welly has been awarded the Worthington Scholarship from the Center of Public Safety or Excellence. The scholarship is awarded to fire company officers who exemplify continuous improvement and encourage others to grow and improve. As a Worthington Scholarship awardee, Captain Welly has received the designation of Fire Officer by the Commission of the Professional Crediting. Captain Welly is now one of 507 credentialed fire officers in the United States and Canada, so that's quite an honor. Library. Readers of all ages can earn prizes during the library's Winter Readathon program, which starts January 6th and runs through March 1st. This year's theme is Read Always, and the library's weekly Winter Storytime series for toddlers and preschoolers starts January 6th. Public Works. Public Works crews worked overnight and all day today in residential areas. Every available staff member and piece of equipment is on the road battling more than 13 inches of snow from this weekend's blizzard. These are extreme conditions, so I'm asking residents, please be patient. Removing snow from the neighborhood roads of far southern areas is proving challenging due to the weight and magnitude of the snow and the ice on the roads. Please know city crews are working as expeditiously as possible to open the roads to the residents and visitors. And I'm assured by Ben that my street in front of my house might be done by tonight, so I'm real pleased. Fargo is ranked #1 in Zip Recruiter's list of top 10 hottest job markets in 2020. The rankings are based on the growing number of job postings and average number of job openings per job seeker, as well as the median wage, amongst other criteria. Interestingly enough, other cities of the Midwest that are in the top 10 include Sioux Falls as #3, Bismarck as #9. And cities outside the Midwest, which we are ranking ourselves against, is Boston, Massachusetts, Providence, Rhode Island, Portland, Maine, San Francisco, California, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and New York City. That's a pretty good ranking for us. And lastly, the city broke ground on Merchantile Project, which is a private-public partnership between the city, Kilbourne Group, Tom and Carrie Smith, and owners of the Great Northern Bicycle Company. This project will create more than 350 new parking spots in the downtown neighborhood, 100 apartments, 9 owner-occupied condos, ground floor retail, public restrooms, and a police substation. We are excited that this partner can do to strengthen the city. Now we have a short video of that groundbreaking. I believe.
Nope, I see head shaking with Ty.
No video? We're not going to see Grinberg on a backhoe? Nope, not tonight. Okay. Next time. Yeah. I'll ask for approval of the agenda, moving item 3 from consent agenda to regular agenda, and the executive session of the airport discussion as in front of #1, just so we can have a discussion of that right away. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the December 16, 2019 regular meeting?
I so move. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Good. Finally, there's a motion to approve of the consent agenda items 1 through 22, excluding item 3, which has been moved to the regular agenda, and the airport discussion will go in front of item 1.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Greenberg.
Aye.
Gehrig.
Yes.
Pepcorn. Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. So, item 22 2A would basically be the airport discussion. We had a discussion about the MOU with the Airport Authority. They had an executive session today as well and have been discussing the MOU that we've worked with mediation very hard on. Do I have a motion? Mr. Strand.
Mayor, I'd like to move that to facilitate mediation to its completion, we extend our 45-day window to the January 13th City Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
Second. Go ahead.
And just for the press, we can't release the MOU at this time since it's in mediation because the Airport Authority members have them as well as we have them, and we have to approve those. When the two public entities approve whatever the MOU is, then it can be distributed for public input. I think we'd just like to say that we've been having fruitful talks, having good discussions with the members of the Airport Authority, and are hopeful that the MOU can be signed next session. Any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Strand,
Yes.
Epcorn,
Aye.
Gary,
Yes.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Mahoney.
Aye. Item 23, John Shockley made it here. John, you're going to explain the WIFIA and the diversion project financing. Is Joel going to help you as well? Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. The Diversion Authority is here tonight to explain the WIFIA process to you folks. This includes the flow of funds, and this has been a lot of work in the making. John has put in many hours coming up with the financial arrangement for the payment of debt service and the flow of funds. It may get a little bit technical. We will allow some time, hopefully at the end, for the commission to be able to ask us some questions. But this is in preparation. We will come before you in the near future requesting a resolution pledging the sales tax revenue to this process. And so at this point, I'll let John take over, and we'll take questions as you may please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Fargo City Commission. Tonight, I'm just briefly going to go over a presentation that I've given before to the different member entities through the Diversion Authority. The reason for the presentation is quite simple and forward. As Joel, the Executive Director, explained, we'll be coming back to each member entity for a pledge resolution regarding pledging revenues to the diversion project. The genesis of this has been the letter of intent that the Diversion Authority submitted in July regarding the U.S. EPA WIFIA loan. We'd requested $510 million in WIFIA loan funds. The EPA approved that request, and they approved a loan of up to $561 million. We anticipate closing that loan in January of 2021. The attractiveness of a WIFIA loan, it's very powerful financing. The interest rate on a WIFIA loan is 1 basis point above the U.S. Treasury rates. So for example, if we close today, it'd be between 2% to 2.25%. So the interest rate is phenomenal. It's a drawdown loan, so you do not pay interest on the loan once you close on it. Instead, you pay interest as you draw the loan down. So for a long-term project such as this, it's very beneficial in that you lock in your interest rate on the date of close, yet you're not paying interest like you would on a bond when you close on the bond. Some of the other important features of the WIFIA loan are a 35-year repayment. So the maturity is 35 years of repayment, so you can lower your annual debt service. You have a 5-year deferral period after substantial completion of the project, so you don't start repayment until 5 years after the project is completed. We're estimating a completion date for the diversion of about 2026, so the first payment wouldn't be due until 2031. It also allows you to sculpt your debt service. So it's very much like having a mortgage, but the mortgage company allows you to pay them last and pay all of your credit card debt first, because it allows you to shift all of your high interest loans and bonds forward, pay those off first, and then you pay off the lower interest debt. And so it's a very powerful financing tool. And in overall savings for the project, it saves a minimum of $600 million over the long term due to interest, because the interest differential of 4.5% for an average sales tax bond versus 2% is quite significant when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars. And so I just briefly wanted to go over how are we pursuing our financing for our project and structuring it. Just briefly, I'll be going over each source of funding for the project and then where that funding goes. So on the Minnesota side, we're receiving state of Minnesota appropriations. Those will be sent directly to the MCC JPA. That was a entity that was formed between the city of Moorhead and Clay County for land acquisition on the Minnesota side. The Minnesota funds will be utilized for the acquisition of properties on the Minnesota side. Then, of course, we have the state of North Dakota. You'll recall this last year, they increased the amount dedicated from the state of North Dakota from $570 million to $750 million. Those funds will go directly into the diversion. It's a cost share agreement, so you have to spend the funds and then you get reimbursed by the state. Then, of course, you have the city of Fargo. You're currently pledging 2 half-cent sales taxes and then a 1/4 cent. Those will continue to be pledged into the revenue fund. And there are some two existing bond issues that are on one of the sales taxes. Our intent is potentially to refund those bond issuance with lower cost debt. We're currently working with Kent on that particular issue to see if we can realize some additional savings. Cass County is also pledging its sales tax, and all the sales taxes have been enacted and passed and are in full force and effect. And then finally, the Cass County Joint Board. You'll recall that they created a special assessment district pursuant to the policy direction of multiple boards, including the Diversion Authority. The intent has always been to use that only as a backstop for financing and not as a source of revenue. So our current financial plan, that is the policy that we're executing, that the special assessment district is only as a source of security. So Cass County Joint Board, they issue warrants. There'll be 2 series of warrants that are being issued by the Joint Board. One is what we refer to as the non-P3 special assessment warrant, and the other one is the P3 special assessment warrant. And those are essentially security instruments. They're not intended to be revenue generators. We just use 350 and 450 as placeholders. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how much they will be. It was just for illustrative purposes. Finally, Cass County also has the ability to impose a deficiency levy for any warrants if there was the catastrophe that you aren't able to pay under the warrants. That's very unlikely that that would ever happen. But as part of the presentation, I wanted to make sure I was fully explaining how those different flows of funds work. And those follow the warrants. They're not actually a source of revenue. Once again, that's a backstop. How are we paying for maintenance? We have the Minnesota entities pursuant to the Joint Powers Agreement provide funding for a portion of the operations and maintenance costs. Cass County Joint Water Resource District also has a maintenance levy authority that will also be supplemented by excess sales taxes, which we'll get into just briefly. And those operations and maintenance will be divided into 2 accounts. One is the P3 operations and maintenance. When you receive the bid from the P3 developer, it'll include a capital component and a long-term operations and maintenance component. So the attractiveness of P3 to the public, unlike a traditional project in which you get the capital cost only, you actually have transparency of what the operations and maintenance costs are over a period of 30 years. So you'll get those 2 bids at the time you receive the bid for the P3. And there's also a sub-account for the non-P3 O&M costs. That would be the mowing of the southern embankment and some of the other costs. So what happens to those funds after they're deposited into the revenue fund? We have an annual budget fund during construction. That pays first your operating costs, and then second, any required debt service for your temporary debt obligations. You'll recall the city of Fargo and Cass County currently have 2 temporary loans through Wells Fargo for temporary construction financing of the project. Those would continue to be paid The intent is to look at transferring those two obligations over to the authority rather than having Cass County and Fargo hold those two obligations. Then during construction, after the required debt service on the temporary bonds is paid, then all the cash goes into the FM diversion project fund, along with proceeds from the debt issuance. And so any of the cash on hand that we're trying to use to pay down construction costs, that will go into the diversion project fund. And finally, if there are any funds remaining every year, those are what we referred to as net pledged revenues. What happens during construction? Those required debt service payments will go to a trustee who is operating under a master indenture of trust. The trustee has been identified as the Bank of North Dakota. During construction, the trustee will be making payments on the temporary debt. As we discussed, the WIFIA allows you to front load those payments without making payments on the WIFIA. So the trustee will be making the temporary debt service payment while the WIFIA loan sits out there. Also, funds coming out of the FM Diversion Project Fund will also help fund some of the costs associated with the MCC JPA. And then any of the net revenues left over will go over to the trustee to pay any required additional required debt service. So what happens after construction? We still have our operating costs, which is the budget for the executive director, the rent payments, the copiers, the staff, those sorts of expenditures. Those are paid first. Then you have net pledged revenues. Those will be transferred over to the trustee every month, just like with any type of sales tax deal. And then we have excess net pledged revenues, which we'll get into in a few minutes. During construction, after construction, the net pledged revenues are swept to the trustee who makes the debt service payments. And then if there are any funds left over after the payment of debt service, those are referred to as excess net pledged revenues. Those are paid to the operations and maintenance fund until that's full. Once that's full, it goes back to the revenue fund and we start the process over every month. In addition, the P3 or the warrants that we talked about from Cass County Joint Board, those go to secure the P3 fund to provide security because the private developer is bringing private equity and capital along with private financing to the deal, and this provides security as the diversion authority pays back those costs. And then finally, if there is a need to issue refunding improvement bonds from the joint board, those warrants would follow any refunding improvement bonds. Once again, you'll see from the flow of funds, all of the orange represents the net pledged revenues. And then finally, the trustee is responsible for payments of rebates due under the IRS code, any of the trustee fees, and then at the end of every month, any excess funds shake down to the excess fund account, and those will flow back to the diversion authority to be used for operations and maintenance costs. So what do you do with the funds that come from the loans? We have the Wells Fargo or other temporary debt during construction. We'll have the WIFIA loan, which we just briefly discussed. Those funds are all treated as bond or loan proceeds. We have SRF loans that the authority is currently in the process of applying for. SRF is the state revolving loan program with the state of North Dakota. They have a 30-year loan program at 2% interest. Once again, our objective and policy direction from the Finance Committee has been to go find low-cost capital, and this is a way to go get low-cost capital. We're currently estimating about $81 million of SRF loans. And then the P3 is providing private funding. During construction, we will be making milestone payments, so approximately 50 to 55% of the total cost of the construction will be paid in milestone payments to the developer. So if we use $900 million as an example for the total cost of the channel, you'd pay about $400 to $500 million in milestone payments over the course of the construction. And then the remaining $400 million would be repaid in availability payments by the trustee. And then if there's any refunding improvement bonds that are needed to be issued by Cass Joint Board, those would be issued but paid for with net pledged revenues by the trustee. All of those funds will go into the FM Diversion Project Fund, which are available to pay for comprehensive project costs, including those milestone payments, including land acquisition, professional fees, et cetera. So post EPA WIFIA closing, assuming that we close on January 2021, we have a significant amount of post-closing activities. We have ongoing reporting requirements. So as part of WIFIA's process, they require construction progress reports. Those are typically quarterly. They require annual financial statements and audited statements every year. They require annual financial pro formas or models. And then once we do close, they will be coming to this area for a site visit. Usually that's within a month after closing. They try to then do ongoing site visits once per year. They like to verify that how their funds are being spent, if they're being spent in conformance with the documents. And then finally, they have a federal compliance audit, which is assuring that we have compliance with the American iron and steel requirements, the Davis-Bacon requirements, and then a number of other federal requirements. Because we've been operating with the Corps for so many years, we're already meeting most of these federal requirements. There are several additional federal requirements that go with the WIFIA loan that we are implementing as part of the documentation, and so that is ongoing. Happy to answer any questions. I know I kind of rushed through that, but I'm trying to be respectful of everybody's time.
Good job, John, and I know you were very instrumental in us getting a WIFIA loan, so thank you for that as well. Commissioner Grinberg, you want to comment on any of that? That's your Finance Committee, you and Commissioner Gehring are on?
No, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, Mayor. With John's acumen, he was able to find a path forward into the EPA and made a huge difference. So kudos to him as well as our Executive Director, Joel. And I think you and I think on the Diversion Authority, we've heard this 2 or 3 times. So I know Commissioner Garrick's been gone and Commissioner Strand maybe hasn't. So it's very timely that they have an update and opportunity to ask questions.
Joel, do you need any action tonight? It's just reporting to us, is that correct?
No action tonight, Mayor, no.
Okay. Any discussion or comments? Thank you very much. Thank you, John, for making it here. I hope you didn't wear the suit all day. We'll go to public hearings. We're number 1A is continued to 1/13/20, hearing on a dangerous building located at 18 8th Avenue North. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gary.
Yes.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Yes. Renaissance Zone project for TLK Holdings for a commercial lease project located at 117 Broadway North. Mark Williams to explain.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Item 24B is a Renaissance Zone project lease application. The applicant is TLK Holdings, and they're proposing to lease commercial space at 117 Broadway. The application meets all the state and local requirements, as well as it's consistent with the goals of our Renaissance Zone development plan. The applicant is proposing to lease 2,700 square feet and estimates about $15,000 in tax exemptions over a 5-year term. That being said, staff is recommending approval to approve the Renaissance Zone project application from TLK Holdings for a lease project at 117 Broadway North and grant the state and income tax exemptions recommended per staff. I'm here for any questions.
What are they going to put in there, Mark?
I believe it's the taco shop.
Okay. Is there anyone here which to speak to this Renaissance Zone project? Does anybody wishes to speak? We would close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, but I also have to make 2 quick comments, if you don't mind. First of all, there's an overhead picture that shows the property, and what I love about it is this isn't that old of a picture, and we have a whole bunch of new developments in that picture. And that's a great sign of progress in our downtown. So that's a great thing. The other one is I won't get compensated for this, but the taco shop has the best drive-through. The nachos, the chicken soft shell tacos, that's a go-to place. So and the grinders, obviously. So I was under the impression that we were going to get samples tonight, but apparently because of the snow.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second. Or, sorry.
Did you second it?
I'm not seconding it. I was trying to move it along.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Now a discussion.
Think about grinders now. Thanks a lot.
A discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Grinberg.
Aye.
Gary.
No.
Strand.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Now we move to alcohol licenses. Application by Chipotle Mexican Grill of Colorado, LLC, Chipotle Mexican Grill for a Class F alcoholic beverage license at 1204 19th Avenue North. Steve Sprague to explain.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Before you tonight is a Class F alcoholic beverage license, which is a full alcohol license. Does require that the food sales exceed the alcohol sales and that there's not a physical bar located in it, so the delivery is at the table or booths. The Chipotle is the building that's up there used to be a bank. It was built as new construction a few years ago as a bank and is now being reconverted to a new facility. We've done the background check and have no issues or concerns. This does come to you with a recommendation of approval.
Is there any president who wishes to speak to this alcoholic beverage license? Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion and can I add one more comment? Steve, could you just talk about these next three are Class F licenses, the annual fee, and then how many licenses are available?
So there's no limit on the F. The restrictions come in the form that it has to be at a restaurant, and the annual fee is $1,500, and the one-time initial fee is $3,000. If you compare it to the license that the FA that has the bar, that's the $100,000 license, and that's really the where the extra cost comes in is having that physical bar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Greenberg?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Strand?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Aye. Application by TLK Holdings Taco Shop, Class F alcoholic beverage license at 117 Broadway North. Steve Sprague.
Same place that we just talked about. The taco shop, they're planning on, this will be a little different than the other taco shops. They will have alcohol here. That's their plan. And again, it's the same restrictions as the Chipotle. We've done the background check. There were some issues in there, but they were really old, and so it does come to you with a recommendation of approval.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this alcohol license? Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I ask for a motion.
I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Strand?
Yes.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Greenberg?
Aye.
Mahoney?
Aye. Item E, application by Bachman Catering, doing business as a VIP room for a Class F alcoholic beverage license at 624 Main Avenue 1.
So this is an upgrade from a GH. They currently are operating with a beer and wine license and would like to add spirits to their menu too. So Anthony applied for, and that's what we're here for. There were no issues in the background check, and so it does come to you with a recommendation of approval.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this Class F alcoholic license? Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I close public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Second.
It's a little slow tonight. It's too much snow blowing. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Greenberg?
Aye.
Strand? Mahoney?
Aye. Item 25, second reading and final adoption of ordinance relating classification of ordinance violations, first reading on 12/2/19 and delayed from the 12/16/19 meeting. I think I have a modified motion, Commissioner Strand. Do you want to make that?
I do. I move to waive the second reading of and to adopt an ordinance amending section 1-0305C of Article 1-03 of Chapter 1 of the Fargo Municipal Code relating to traffic code and approve that same, finding that such amendment serves to promote the purpose of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Fargo.
Is there a second?
Second.
Nancy Morris is there for questions if anybody has one. Nobody has any questions. We had executive session on this to answer questions, so that's why the commissioners probably know about it at this time. No other discussion. We'll have roll call, please.
Strand?
Yes.
Greenberg?
Aye.
Pepcorn?
Aye.
Gehrig?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Yes. Resolution amending resolution authorizing promissory note subject to budget appropriation and authorizing grant of security. I have Jim Gilmore down there. I guess it's Eric Johnson that's going to explain this.
Yes, at your last meeting, you actually approved a resolution virtually identical to this subsequent to. This is, has to do with the $2 million loan for the mercantile parking ramp, $13 million parking ramp, $11 million in the form of bonds that'll be issued within the next month and a half or so. And then this is $2 million on top of that, which is an interest-free loan for 10 years. This is a little easier flow chart than the one you just went through. The two boxes here, in 10 years, city pays $2 million without interest in 10 years. That's it. And really the only reason this is back on here is in the aftermath of getting ready for closing. Creditor just realized it would be helpful to have some language change that didn't, if there was a non-appropriation, wouldn't automatically cancel the note. We would just have to take action to terminate it, giving the city commission the opportunity to fulfill the obligation, pay the $2 million as it fully intends to do.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Or a second?
Second.
Moved second. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Pepcorn.
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Gehrig,
No.
Mahoney.
Aye. Item 27 is applications for property tax exemptions for improvements made to buildings. We have several there. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Strand and then Pepcorn? Yep. Discussion, roll call.
Strand,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Gehrig, Mahoney.
Aye. Item 28, you have my recommendations for the Board of Health. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Strand,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Gehrig, Mahoney.
Aye. And now we have item 3 that was moved from regular motion, and I think Commissioner Strand, you brought this to our attention. Steve Sprague is in attendance to help us out. Steve, could you just please tell us what the motion is for the public, please?
So we have an election coming up this June, and as part of that process, we put before the board the recommended precinct locations for the 2020 election. I get the list from the Cass County. Actually, since we join our election services with Cass County, they're setting where the precincts are, and so this is more of a notification for you so that we're all aware that which precincts we're going to be using for the election.
Commissioner Strand?
Thank you. I'll give a little history on this topic, and Steve, maybe first I'll ask a question. This statement in here, following the school district's requests, efforts have been made to avoid using schools due to security-related issues. Do you have any more information on that request and when that was delivered by the school district, or the history of that by chance?
Yeah, in November of 2006, we got a letter from Lowell Wolf. It was sent to myself and to Mike Montplisher, the county auditor. And essentially, they were notifying us that, I'll just paraphrase here, while using schools as polling sites has been a long tradition, we feel that security concerns for our students must take priority over the continuance of this tradition. And recognizing this may cause some challenges, we're willing to work with you going forward. But this was, 14 years ago now, so that's kind of the stance that we have been working with.
If I might
And
continue, I'm sorry.
just let me follow a little bit more, and then I talked to Dr. Gandhi today, superintendent this time. He says security has been upgraded in the schools. They have 22 schools. We have 15 sites here that are identified by the county. And his sense is that the school board would rather not get back into having them as polling places, but I leave it to your discussion.
And I reached out to one of the school board members who was there back when this letter surfaced from Lowell Wolf. Long story short, the school board, and I wasn't on the board till a couple years later, the school board, to my knowledge, countered that letter from an administrator, and their position, to my knowledge, was different than the letter indicated relative to having polls in schools for safety issues. What's been suggested to me, and I know we have till April 6th by statute to set the polling places, and even after that, there can be some modifications if it's needed. What's been suggested to me, and I have a motion to present to us, it's my sense the school board, in fact, when I was on the board, we voted to have this discussion and to ask the county to open up the polls in some schools if it was appropriate for security purposes. and there weren't problems with that. I mean, we voted to, as a board subsequent to this just a few years ago, to try open these up again to have polling in schools. There's a public sentiment that it's kind of cool to see kids seeing votes in elections in schools. There's a civic element to that, you know, and we've lost that. So what occurs to me, and I'll add one more bit of information. The schools had some elections since then, and they're holding their own elections in schools when they vote on their mill levy. You know, at least when the one I was there, the bulk of their polling places were in schools by their own choice, because they, at that time, the board wanted them to be in schools. So I offer this amendment, this motion to the board to consider. I move that the city of Fargo request an update from the Fargo Board of Education regarding the availability of public schools for election precinct locations in light of security-related issues prior to us approving the 2020 voting locations.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Strand?
What I'm asking for is to have a current discussion by the school board of, is this where they're at now versus in 2006? And I'll honor wherever they're at. If they say that it's not appropriate to have elections in schools, fine. But I do also know that at the state level, subsequent to these discussions of safety and security in elections, they had a whole process at the state level to address security concerns for polling places in schools. And those folks who did that were kind of surprised later to find out Fargo wasn't doing them elections in schools. So I'd just like to find out where the current school board is.
Well, one of the things that comes up is that there's 2 in every district that we've had in our districts. There's 22 schools. Sense from talking to the superintendent, they're not really excited about, there's easy parking, there's ability, we have 2 in our libraries as well, John. So would you want to table this recommendation as precinct locations until we get the feedback from the school board? Is that more?
That is my intent, to
Okay.
ask for this report from the school board before we act on it.
Commissioner Grinberg?
Chairman, I have a question and maybe a suggestion. This question is to Steve. The county's role in this, they're the ones that interface with the state and work with us. Is that how I interpret that?
Yes, the county, this is the primary election for the county. And so there were, I think it was about in the year 2000, we put a question before on the ballot to ask the citizens whether or not they wanted to combine our election with the county. And so we did that, it was approved. And so we have been combining our election with the county's election for, you know, many, many, many years now.
So then my suggestion is, and not to use the analogy, this would be in a vacuum solely with the school district. If we're going to ask the school district to come before us, we ought to ask the county for their position as well, because in light of 14 years ago with safety issues, there was a real concern over cost and poll workers availability. There's a continual challenge to get people to work these elections, which in itself is an interesting debate. But the point being is, if the expectation is to add more precincts and to the schools, I don't know if that really is realistic based on what the county over the past has experienced. So my point would be, if we're going to ask school districts to come in, whether it's a motion or delay this action, we also ask the county to come in. Maybe it's Mike Montplaisir for a report and his sense of things as well.
Yeah.
That's really where the
If I could comment, just a couple of things. So prior to 2006, we had 39 precincts in the city of Fargo, and each precinct required a minimum of 5 workers. So that's 195 people that we had to get to work. This list is 15 precincts, and so what we've done is, and obviously the city is growing, and so what we've done is combine so that we have fewer precincts and we have less workers that way. And I know Mike has talked for a number of years about going to vote centers, so it would be similar to what you have with the early voting, where you can go to one place. You know, you could live in Castleton and come to Fargo to work and go and vote at the Fargo Dome. and you wouldn't have to vote in your precinct. And that's one of his goals, is to get there. And he thinks we can get there now. We needed some new equipment. We've got that. And he thinks we can get there in maybe 2022. And so we may actually see even less precincts, but longer hours or more availability. And so the schools themselves, you know, I used to vote in a school, and you know, we found that the mixing of the kids, and you know, we were voting in hallways and different things like that, and as Mayor Mahoney mentioned, the parking situations, the schools really weren't working for us anymore. The final comment that I would like to make is we did have another place. It's actually the Plains Art Museum that reached out to us and said, hey, we would like to be considered for a polling location. Obviously not for this year. We need to do some evaluation of parking availability and site setup and some of those things. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into picking the locations. Just this year, El Zagel is under a construction, and so they're not going to be available. And so we tried to find another place for that, and it's not as easy as you know, you might think sometimes. So certainly, if you want me to reach out to Mike and the schools, I can do that. But I just wanted to kind of make those comments to let you know kind of.
So Commissioner Strand, could you add that we'll ask the county as well?
Absolutely, and I'll join in. I'm not asking for more polling locations. What I'd like to know is, are there any schools that you'd offer up that satisfy your concerns for security that would work in today's environment relative to the needs of security today? And if the school district and the school board doesn't offer up any schools, they don't offer up any schools. If they do, I'd be curious which ones they might be and if they're options. I'll say one last thing. You know, just me. I'd much rather see elections in schools than churches. It's just kind of an anomaly to me that we take our voters and run them through churches. I'd much rather see schools, if we can, if they work, if they're safe and can work as options. That's where I'd like to see some options that include schools, and rather than just blanketly rule them out. I know the school district countered that 2006 letter. In fact, maybe recalled it or pulled it back or countered the position from that letter from their administrator that wasn't done with the authority then of the school board, as I understand it. There's a few school board members there that were there then.
So of the 15, 6 are churches, so that addresses that issue. So the motion, can I just have it for us to know what the motion is at this present time?
The motion is to move that the City of Fargo request an update from the Fargo Board of Education regarding availability of public schools for election precinct locations in light of security-related issues prior to us approving prior to the city approving the 2020 voting locations.
And Commissioner Grinberg's concern with the county, do you want to address that as well?
Absolutely.
Where would you like to insert Cass County into your motion?
How about we request an update from the Fargo Board of Education and the Cass County
There you go.
regarding the availability of public
Clear
schools.
to everybody the motion? Okay. Any other discussion? Roll call vote?
Strand,
Yes.
Horn. Grinberg.
Aye.
Garrick.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye. Is there any other business? Motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, did you want one more thing, Eric, or? No, oh, okay. The hand signals confused me. Done before 6? You guys feeling okay?
Sit on my hands.
Started at 4.